Commissioner approach the bench and retrieve defenses A, the thank you note. Thank you. May I proceed?
You may.
May it please the court. Members of the jury, this case can be summed up in one very simple phrase. No bribe, no crime. Members of the jury, we saw no bribe. Now, we as the defense came before you with 3 witnesses, much like the prosecution did. However, the prosecution had a burden. They had to prove, based on their witnesses, as well as our witnesses, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the allegations that they are bringing forth upon Ms. Covington are true, and that it is very unlikely, almost certain, that there is no other explanation for what happened. Members of the jury, this idea of reasonable doubt is not one to take lightly. The prosecution took on a very high burden today, the highest burden in our justice system. They had to prove each and every element of the charge of bribery beyond this reasonable doubt. They gave you reason to believe that what we saw was bribery. And members of the jury, we saw no bribery. We saw no bribe. So we saw no crime. Now let's go through the elements that they had to prove beyond this reasonable doubt. Now, even though we as the defense took on no burden, we didn't have to prove a single thing. But we brought forth 3 witnesses to explain to you what really happened. And explain these elements and how they do not fit what happened. Now, the first element, that Ms. Covington's a public official, is not disputed. We agree with that. Ms. Covington works for the Gambling Commission and was appointed by Governor Walton. This is true. But the second and the third elements need to be explained a little more. The second element, which essentially asks, did Ms. Covington accept something of value, such as money, in return for her vote? And the second one, did Ms. Covington intend for this money or something of value to influence her vote and change her vote? So the things we have to see, just to clarify those 2 elements. First, we have to see a bribe. We have to see an exchange. And second, we have to see the vote change because of the bribe. And I'd like to go step by step through this. Let's start with the first element. Did she accept anything of value? Members of the jury, the simple answer is no. There is no reason to believe, in the words of Ollie Thomas, that any exchange occurred. Now, the state would have you believe that on April 16th, Ms. Covington met with Mr. Bancroft to have this exchange. But members of the jury, the only person that testified today, other than Ms. Covington, who was present in the VIP room on April 16th, was Ollie Thomas. Now recall Ollie Thomas's testimony. His words were, "I have no reason to believe anything happened under the table." He told you, Ms. Covington sat to the left, put her briefcase down on her left. Mr. Bancroft was on the right, sat his briefcase down on the right. Members of the jury, think about it. If there was going to be an exchange in that VIP room, Ollie Thomas, based on his training that he testified to, would have seen any sort of weird motions, awkward movements, to see that Avery Bancroft reached down to get his briefcase and handed it over. But members of the jury, Ollie Thomas, the only witness, did not see a bribe. Furthermore, let's start from the beginning then. Putting the money in the briefcase. Corey Hyde told you that there may have been $200,000 in the briefcase. She couldn't tell you exactly how much there was. She didn't count it herself. She saw her boss putting money in a briefcase and bring the briefcase to the meeting. But members of the jury, she also told you in her cross-examination that after leaving that meeting in Suite 312, Mr. Bancroft came back to the office with the same briefcase. Members of the jury, if there was an exchange, Avery Bancroft would have come back with a different briefcase. Not only that, she did not count the money in the briefcase. She didn't open the briefcase when Mr. Bancroft came back. There is no reason to believe that that money would have even left the briefcase, or that a briefcase changed hands. Because members of the jury, look back to reasonable doubt. Did we see a bribe? No, because no one saw a bribe. So we have this $200,000 in Ms. Covington's bank account. And the state would have you believe that this is $200,000 from this bribe, that was what was in the briefcase. But members of the jury, even though the state told you that Ms. Covington would have the most potential to lie in today's court, we provided evidence of the contrary. You have in front of you a thank you note from Lee and Andy. Now, Ms. Covington testified in her direct examination that this note came with $200,000. That this $200,000 was repayment on an investment from 10 years ago. Now, the state had every opportunity to cross-examine Ms. Covington on this note and give you reason to believe that this is not where that money came from. But members of the jury, this is a reasonable explanation for what happened. A reasonable explanation for why there was $200,000 deposit in Ms. Covington's bank account on April 17th. Now, Ms. Covington, in her direct examination, came before you to tell you why she voted for Avery Bancroft's casino. She didn't have to testify, but she chose to clear the air, to give you reason to believe that what she's saying is true, because it is. Now, because we saw no bribe, we now go to the second element. Did Ms. Covington have the intent for this something of value to influence her vote? Members of the jury, the answer is no. She gave you ample reason to believe that Mr. Bancroft's casino was the most popular in Midlands. Ollie Thomas corroborated that. Mr. Bancroft's casino, the Black Bear, was the most prestigious casino he's ever seen. All the high rollers, professional poker players come in there. It's very successful. Members of the jury, in order for the state to prove beyond a reasonable doubt the second element of their claim is to show that her vote changed. But members of the jury, if she was going to vote for Avery Bancroft all along, her vote did not change. She had more than enough reason to use her job and her responsibility to give back to Midlands and not take risks. Now, there was a confusing aspect of Ms. Covington's cross-examination that I want to explain to you. Ms. Covington is a poker player. But members of the jury, Ms. Covington played poker with her own money. Shannon Stark wanted to play with Midland's money. And that's why she voted for Avery Bancroft. Members of the jury, let's take a look at reasonable doubt once more. If at any point in this trial, there is even a shred of doubt based on reason and common sense that gives you reason to believe that the state did not meet their burden on each of their elements, you cannot find Ms. Covington guilty. Members of the jury, we saw no bribe. We saw no crime. We did not see her vote change. Now, even though the state brought forth an expert, all the expert could tell you was that they touched the briefcase. We corroborated that. All they could tell you is that Devin Del Sesto saw a change in briefcases. But Devin Del Sesto also told you that the briefcase that was in the mail was the identical briefcase to Ms. Covington. That's corroborated by Ms. Covington. Members of the jury, is it reasonable to believe that Ms. Covington did not accept a bribe? Yes. Because if there was no bribe, there was certainly no crime. Find her not guilty. Thank you.